Good day. Happy September, everyone. We are back. Maker That Money podcast, the podcast where we talk about turning your hobby into your jobby. I am your host, Pooch of Repkord. With me, as always, my number two, my compatriot, my rock, my everything, Mr. Andrew Mayhall of 3D Gloop. Good morning, Andrew. How are you today?
Good morning, Pooch. I'm doing great. How are you?
Oh, it's so good to be back. I miss being in the chair and
It's been a minute.
miss seeing all of our familiar faces in the chat. Shout out to Liz and Grant from 3D Musketeers and K2 Kevin. Good to see you. Hutchman
Yep.
Makerspace. Awesome to see some familiar faces. If you are tuning in for the first time, we record this live just about every Friday, 9 a.m. Pacific time. This podcast, we are starting season 2. We've officially are returning from our summer break. I hope everybody had a good summer and it's back to school time, right? My kids just went back to school, and for those of you that have kids, maybe you're just getting back in the swing of things as well. So, welcome back to the school year. We got a lot of exciting stuff coming up for this season and things to talk about, but I thought today we'd get back to our roots, do a little bit of an update in terms of like all the exciting stuff that happened over the summer. We had a couple cool events that we went to that we need
Oh,
to talk
man.
about. Business happenings. But again, what we like to talk about, we are very passionate about being makers, being entrepreneurs, and the intersection of those two things. So we talk about what it takes, the realities of what it is to take your passion, your hobby, and really try to make a go of it, right?
hmm
So show of hands in the audience if you have started trying to make money. In the audience, I say, in the chat right now. Great way to engage with us. We also have our call-in line. If people are brave enough to get on
Get in the hot seat.
the hot seat and be vocal and ask questions. But we love conversation about maker entrepreneurship. But show of hands, have you started a venture from your hobby? Tell me if you are, or maybe you already have, or you have been for years. So say, I've been at it for this many years, or I've got an Etsy store, or I'm thinking about doing it. We want to hear about what you're doing. If you're jumping in on season 2, we did something like 60 something episodes of season 1.
Yep.
And season 1 was kind of, it was more than a year worth of content. We didn't really kind of do the summer break, and it was an interesting mashup. But this seems like a good way to go about it, I think, having a on season, and then we take a little summer break.
Yeah.
Which is
It's
always
good to recharge
Good to
and, kind of
recharge. Yeah.
put our heads down and get to work on some of the things that we're slipping.
Right. Interestingly enough, in my business, and I don't know how you you can speak to yours,
hmm
but seasonally, summer is always our slow time. Right. And
Yes.
so
hmm
inherently people might think, well, that seems like a better time to be doing passion projects and talking, podcasts and stuff like that. But for us, um, I really had to put the nose to the grindstone because it's like, we're fighting for dollars here. And so I had to
Yeah.
be a bit more focused in the business and kind of some strategy stuff. And so it was good for me to kind of get a new plan in place. What do you see?
Great.
How seasonally affected are you guys
Yeah, so
at Gloop?
I think anything, in the kind of maker hobbyist space, there are seasonal times, if you will. We definitely see a decrease in order volume and revenue. Some other KPIs, they typically fall a little bit lower in the summer months. Just we kind of attested to people out doing things, enjoying their summer.
Yeah.
Kids are out of school, the people taking vacations, dollars are going towards activities instead of projects.
Yeah.
In kind of this space.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
that's yeah.
And I think it's good to have an awareness of your customer
hmm
base and
Oh,
your
absolutely.
industry. And one of my suppliers is a lumber supplier, and they're the opposite. They are gangbusters
hmm
in the summer because they're tied very closely to the building industry, right?
Yeah, I
And
was
so
gonna
that's
say that
like,
makes a lot of
so
sense.
that's when they're building and all that stuff. But then in the winter and stuff, they're lean, so they're looking for different opportunities. And what's kind of cool about that is when you start to, you know, plan around these things, like you can
Hmm.
realize like there's more opportunities to be had. There's better deals to be had if you are looking at
Hmm.
your vendors perhaps and saying like, what's their seasonal effect and how eager are they for this business, right? It's all supply and demand
Oh, absolutely.
at the end of the
Hmm.
day. And so it's like it's a lot easier for me to get concessions in the slow times from vendors and stuff than it is when they're, you know, everybody's banging down their door. Um,
Hmm.
or or you know, good excuse to make sure you know negotiate some blanket order stuff where you can like hedge across you know
Yep.
seasons and get supply up and down. So there's some interesting strategy that's tied to seasonal demand of stuff too that
Oh,
could be its own
yes.
episode, as we always like to say. Um,
Yes,
but
absolutely. I know that some of the things we're getting ready to hit that busy season, especially in this hobbyist and maker space. Like, towards the end of the year,
oh yeah,
things just start going crazy, especially right around the holidays.
absolutely.
So,
I was looking. I don't know if
mhm,
you've read up on your stats lately, but I was looking at something like our revenue for the year is so Q4 weighted.
yeah.
I want to say that something like 50% of our revenue is coming from
Oh, wow.
Q4,
That's
or
that's
has historically. I haven't done it for the last year yet, but again, you know, having the you know the sense of timing around stuff is important
yeah.
and planning for that, right? Like we know a busy retail if you're tied to hobbies and
Hmm.
retail and stuff like that, you're going to see a lot more demand in
Hmm.
the high holidays of purchasing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting for us. We see a lot of a pretty good spread. I'd say, Q2 things start going down, middle of, beginning of Q3 things are kind of at the lowest. And then going into Q4, that's where things really pick up. So, it's pretty spread out. I was just taking a look at our analytics here real quick, but yeah, 50% in Q4. That's impressive.
It's
That.
not. Well, I don't know. I mean, I would rather it was spread a little bit more evenly because it's been
Mhm.
really challenging for us when we go feast or famine with
Sure.
stuff.
Yeah.
So, so you know, we can go into that in a little bit. But you know, trying to find a way to hedge and you know not be
Mhm.
as tethered to one specific revenue stream is obviously critical. But
Mhm.
before we get to that, we have a tradition on the pod
Oh,
where
yeah.
we do wins of the week because we are positive individuals and we talk about things that are good in our lives. And this is the time in the chat where everybody needs to share something awesome that's happening. It can be in your personal life. It can be basic. You know, you made the best cup of coffee this morning and you were just super happy about it, or you know, you signed a contract or did a big business deal. Andrew, I know you've got a lot of wins
Oh
queued
my
up from the summer, so give me one of them at least.
give you one of them. I mean, let's just say, I'm really looking forward. It's kind of a future win. We put a lot of work into getting to where we were over the past couple of months, and I'm so excited that all of it came together in just the right time to go to a couple of these shows and have a fantastic event. And I think really looking forward. I laid a lot of groundwork for myself for the next shows and the next events, and just being able to build upon that.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's a win, kind of just a general, feeling good about where I am now.
Right. Right. Um, I'm gonna say this. Let's see. I'm gonna take my win for the week. Da, 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 da. Let's just go with I'm excited for some events that are coming up. I've finally booked and got a plan together to get to Earth. Um,
Nice.
that was more of a challenge than I was thinking. We are not having a booth this year, unfortunately. You'll notice we're missing from the final sponsor list, unfortunately, just based on budget and all that stuff. But
Yeah.
the team was very supportive of us in that, and I'm just excited to be out and be with my people at the end of the month. So if you're not familiar with what ERF is, that's the East Coast RepRap Festival.
It's
So
gonna be
all things
awesome.
3D printing, which we love. And that's in Bel Air, Maryland. If you are in the greater Washington, Maryland, Baltimore metro,
Hmm.
well worth the little pilgrimage out to the Aberdeen Proving Grounds Arena where it's
Hmm.
held, and check out the latest and greatest in 3D printing and making. And a lot of the people in the chat, I'm sure we'll see you there. Let us know if you're going to ERF in the chat. Maple Leaf Makers, good morning. Good to see you. Ethan Coulter is here. Winslow Joy, we don't get to see you. I saw him at ERF last year. I hope we'll see you again this coming one.
He had something exciting. Looks like his XL
His
shipped.
Prusa XL shipped yesterday. Yes, we're finally seeing the backlog of a lot of those Prusa orders coming
Hmm.
in, and given the challenges that we've seen with manufacturing a
Oh yes.
box, I do
Hmm.
not envy the massive, massive challenge around manufacturing a machine as beautiful and complicated as the Prusa
Hmm.
XL. I've been lucky enough to be on the beta team for quite a while, and I've seen even in the shipping versions, like they are still like issuing
Yes.
rev changes and stuff like that, which is actually typical for the way a company like Prusa operates. They are very committed to the idea of continuous improvement. They move fast, they break things, they improve on it all the time, and that's where a lot of the value is. I think they've taken a lot of fire and frustration,
Hmm.
um, because a lot of people are like, well, this is incomplete, or
Yeah.
it's missing features and stuff like that. But if you look at it in terms of like their track record to
Hmm.
improve and deliver, and I like to say, like, they're still issuing firmware updates for the Mark II, and they're on the Mark
Yeah.
IV, level platform. Um, they're going to get there. It's just
Hmm.
being an early adopter and being part of an ecosystem where they are very much iterating, and sometimes maybe using actual customers more as, you don't want to say using them as testers, but realizing that even with the
They're
amount of,
following a lean startup model,
yes,
and
yeah,
where exactly. I mean, sometimes you have to, use some customers as guinea pigs. Unfortunately, where you're testing something to make sure it's going to work.
right,
you
right,
know,
right.
so otherwise you're just going to keep delaying the timeline, and then no one's happy. So,
Right, like at some point, you gotta pull the trigger and you gotta ship.
hmm,
And I'll
yep,
tell you what, like I said, I've been on the beta team for XL for a while, and they are very committed to having a robust testing program. And even with all of that, there's just stuff that just gets missed, that you just
hmm,
use cases, and I- maybe part of the challenge and something to think about, when you look at the people that they're like reaching out to do beta.
hmm,
Um, they are of a certain caliber, and I understand, because you need commitment and understanding and like a base level. Like, you can't just get a complete noob in the door to do it all the
yeah, hmm.
but when you don't
Sometimes,
when you don't
yeah,
have that individual, you miss the
yeah,
things that we just assume are obvious or intuitive,
hmm,
right?
yeah,
So finding
yeah,
that balance of skill set is
hmm,
probably pretty important, because
yeah,
let's be honest, man, like this type of platform is not, it's still not a beginner, it's not an appliance grade thing. Like, there
hmm,
there is a lot of variables to control, a lot of things to tinker with, play with. You have an
yep.
XL, right? You got one.
Yes. Yeah, I got one. I was one of the first ones to get it. I got it back in May, like early May.
Yeah.
And I had to send that one back because there were some issues with it, unfortunately. I've got another one,
It
and
happens. Well, did they fix
yeah, I
it? They
love
fixed
it.
it?
They fixed it. They
Good.
fixed it. But I actually experienced some issues where the testing team I reached out to support. They had no idea of
Yeah.
these issues, and like had long conversations back and forth, and hopefully help them out for troubleshooting in the future. But there's something to be said for getting the hardware out to standard
Yeah.
average users.
What by the way, like, what timeline did that, like, how long did it take them to replace it? And like, cuz
It
we're
took
on
them
the
a
bleeding
little
edge
bit.
with XL, right?
Yeah, it took them a little bit. I didn't get my replacement until um, early July, I believe.
And when did you
Um,
get the first one?
The first one I got was early May, so it took them about 2 months, give or take,
Oh,
to get
really?
it all.
Now, is that
Yeah,
because there was some back and forth on
there was some back and
diagnosis?
forth, and there
You were
was some
also we
waiting.
were traveling for a lot of that too, so I
We
don't
were,
know.
yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah, we were
it wasn't
traveling.
like they're like, oh, hold on, and then it took them 2 months to ship one. Then
Exactly. No,
okay, okay,
they were in constant communication. It wasn't like
okay,
a
okay.
black hole and then 2 months later it's like, "Oh, hey, here it is." I think it was probably closer to like 6, maybe 7 weeks. So about maybe a month and a half, give or take. But
Okay.
yeah. It was good. I mean, now unfortunately, I mean, there was still some issues with the replacement one, but yeah, Prusa is fantastic at support. So,
Yeah.
um, you know, the one that I've got now, I love it.
Good, good, good,
So,
good. Well, again, I think, people don't. It's tough because humans are an impatient lot in general.
mhm,
So it's like we want it now and stuff like that. But
yes,
again, when I look at the value of like an established brand like this, and I know that they're committed to like making it right eventually, and sometimes it just takes a lot longer than we expect,
mhm,
especially the more complicated a product becomes.
yeah,
So, hopefully we look back at this, a year from now and be like, oh, remember, and the ecosystem is just going to be like next level, right? It's like they're
yeah,
constantly like the firmware is improving, the speed of the machines, or the reliability of the machines improving.
yeah.
You have a path because you just got the single head, but it's like you've got a path now
Mhm.
to just if you want to add a second or a third or a fourth or
Oh, that was
fifth,
always the plan.
right? It's an
Yeah, I was
expandable
gonna get the
platform. Yeah.
I was gonna get the small or the early one, so I get it in. I can get some testing under my belt, and then after all of the 5 tool heads ship and the upgrade kits could become available, I was gonna jump right in line and get those.
Right.
you know,
And honestly, I think there's some merit to sometimes waiting and like letting other people go
Mhm.
through the pains of like that
Yep.
particular part of it too, because
Yep.
there's literally like independent teams working on different something like a
Oh yeah.
platform, because this like something like that, it goes beyond just like a machine to like this like larger ecosystem where there's like focus on just the extruder
Mhm.
heads, right? And
Yep.
they share a lot of similarities with the Mark IV, but they're not completely the same. And the tool changing
Yeah.
version is different than the fixed head
Well,
version.
it's
Yeah,
like in auto manufacturing, you have teams that work on the engine, team that work on the brake and the transmission, and these are independent teams, and then eventually they all come together to build the completed, automobile.
yeah,
It's too complex for one person to do everything. So,
sure.
you know,
I think
it
it's
makes
interesting.
sense.
We're going down a bit of a rabbit hole, but I do think it's interesting to talk about larger companies that are like a little further
Mhm.
down the road than like we are as small business
Oh,
owners,
yes.
right? And think about the challenges that we might face, 5-10 years from now, because Bruce has been around from the jump of the rep rap, movement. So
Mhm.
what,
They're
2009?
12 years,
Yeah,
13
yeah,
years now,
yeah,
something
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
that.
Well,
Maybe even more.
they had their 10-year anniversary edition, last year. So
21.
I think
Oh,
they're
was it last year?
I
I thought it was 21, but
well, maybe that's when the printer got released. I don't know, but they're pushing 12 dozen years or something like
yeah.
that. Which in our space, I mean, 3D printing has been around a lot longer, but since the patents opened up and like
Oh, yeah.
the hobbyist rep rap maker movement,
Well,
they
it's
were OGs.
yeah, I mean, you said something about how it is kind of interesting to talk about these larger companies because for instance, we're still kind of a two-man shop over here. And that means I touch every facet of the business. Every single thing,
Yeah,
I have some sort of control and touch and, say over.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, we're growing at a stupid rate and literally, probably by, early next year there are going to be pieces where I might know what's going on,
yeah.
but I am not touching them anymore. Like they're completely handed off. And as things continue to grow, you now have to figure out how you manage people and how
Oh,
the organization as a whole moves forward. Thankfully for us, we have a fairly simple product. But at the end of the day, there's still processes that we have to do, and so like that's been one of my big, kind of pieces I've been working on over the summer break here is figuring out and nailing down processes and coming up with procedures
yeah,
for how eventually I hand over operations.
yeah.
So,
Dude, and as somebody that's like walked that road and had many challenges with it, right? Because it's like,
mhm,
like you started solo and
mhm.
then, being able to let go of some of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
where even when I know that I need to is a challenge. Some stuff I'm more than happy to let go of, right? Like, and I still can't let go of some things.
Mm-hmm.
But my gosh, you pivot away from being. I mean, it's the common saying, right? It's like you want to move
Mm-hmm.
toward working on the business, not in the business,
Yeah.
right? Because eventually we all want to be able to retire, and you need to be able to like structure something that allows you to divest your time or trade time for what you've built in terms of passive income.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a long road, and a lot of people never get there, right? How many people die
Mm-hmm.
in their business, I wonder, under the weight of it?
Oh, geez.
That's a bit
Yeah.
morbid, but you get the idea. But let's pin that for a second. That's an interesting subject of discussion,
Mm-hmm.
and we have an interesting juxtaposition to get into. One of the things I'm alluding to in our title, you're going through explosive growth. I've had to deal with
Mm-hmm.
the challenges of contraction. And
Mm-hmm.
so we're gonna that's kind of the theme of today's episode. We're gonna talk about that in a second. But before we do that, I want to do some finish our summer updates and talk about some of the events that we went to over
Yes.
the summer, and maybe the
Mm-hmm.
business value that we saw, what worked, what didn't work. What do you got?
Mm-hmm.
Where did we go? Because we were at a couple different things.
Yes, yes. So I actually we pulled out of Earth, or I'm sorry, not Earth, Murph.
Murph.
Yeah,
That's
Murph.
the
Uh
Hey, I'm
is
sorry. Pause.
Hey.
Joe,
Yeah.
thank you. Very generous. Thank you, Project Red, for jumping in and the $20 donation to support what we do here. We appreciate you, my friend.
Awesome.
I hope
Thank
we'll
you.
see you at the end of the month at Earth. You were
Hmm.
saying you jumped off of
Yeah,
Murph. We
yeah,
didn't
so
we didn't attend it either. Yeah.
yeah, so we pulled out of Murph because we had an opportunity come up kind of last minute to go and attend an event down at West Coast, San Francisco. Since it's happened now, probably most have heard now. Open Sauce.
Oh,
So
the
3D
saucy
Gloop was
sauce. Yeah.
3D Gloop was a sponsor of the event. So
Yeah, you were
that
an
was a really
inaugural
cool.
sponsor.
Yes, it was a really cool.
Hedgehog.
You know,
Thank you for a buck 50, buddy. Thank you. I keep
yeah, it
interrupting.
was.
Well, people keep throwing money at us, and so I
Hey.
gotta credit them.
Yeah, no, it was a really cool opportunity. And we got to do a couple of really cool spectacles. We introduced our giant industrial robot arm, Jeff, for the first time. He's a lot of fun. And it was kind of a funny, sort of story to come up with that, but I'll save that for another time.
You guys
And
need to go look up Jeff if you haven't had a chance to see. There's some good. Joel did a good video on it.
Mhm. H.
JEPHF is the
Yep.
spelling. My name is Jeff. And
Yes.
that was a fun little spectacle that we put together. Andrew's brainchild. And it's a giant industrial Fanic robot that did tug of war. So go
Yep.
check out search for, what are we searching for? Open sauce, man
Yeah, I
versus
think it's
machine robots, something like that. It's on
I,
Joel's channel if you want to go thumb
yeah, it's
through
on
that.
Joel's channel. Just go to Joel's channel. Like everyone knows Joel. Just go to his channel. You'll find
That's
it.
3D printing nerd for anybody listening back after the fact.
It was a fun spectacle. There was some things that we learned. We it was a very condensed timeline. I think when we got the go ahead and everything else, it was like 9 weeks. So from nothing to completed program robot, playing tug of war, and all of the legal hoops and
Oh my
insurance and
gosh.
all sorts of stuff that we had to jump through happened in 9 weeks.
And I got to be honest, I helped out with the organization around this, although Andrew did the bulk of it. But when he first pitched this idea to me, I was like, well, I love it, but there's no way this is going to happen. Like, it's just too potentially. I mean, these machines, first of all, this is like, I'm not talking about these little tiny little arm robots that we see just for testing.
This thing weighs 5,000 pounds.
5,000
altogether.
pounds industrial robot for like hoisting engine blocks around. Like, it could literally fling an engine block across the room. It'll kill you and not think twice. smash you
Yeah.
into the ground, like whatever, right?
Yeah.
So massive safety considerations, just the getting power to it, just being able to
Mhm.
transport it. I mean, you had to
Mhm.
buy a
We
truck
had to buy a truck.
with a lift
Yes.
gate. It broke the
Yep.
lift gate. All those
Yeah.
things. All those things.
Yeah.
Uh, Win, thank you so
Oh, come on,
much.
guys.
Everybody, my heart is full right now. You guys, we have not, we have intentionally not made a point of like trying to solicit
Mhm.
support, but it does mean a lot to us to know that there are other people that are out there that are passionate about this
Mhm.
content and appreciate it, and help support us bringing it to you, because it's just a passion project for the both of us right
Yep.
now, and to be able to take time out of our businesses and our day to do this is costly, and so we appreciate you guys letting us continue to bring this kind of thing to you, and thank you from the bottom of our hearts to
Mhm. Yes, thank
all
you
the
so
donors,
much.
and even if you're just here and participating in the chat, that we love you for that as well too. So
Yes.
thank you to everybody that could be here. So that was Jeff. So that was open sauce. Now that
Mhm.
I'll just give my take on open sauce. Really interesting event. This was the first year they
Mhm.
had it at Pier 35 in San Francisco. As an attendee, as a location, really cool space. Okay,
Oh, it
so
was
this is
awesome.
like a pier, like an old converted pier. It was like a very open, massive space. Just concrete floors, like long galley,
Mhm.
like out over the water. Um, and as a location, I think San Francisco is a great choice, right? You got Bay Area nearby. It was reasonably accessible, from
Mhm.
internationally, all sorts of stuff. William Osmond was the key organizer around it, and a lot of it, frankly, was probably his excuse to just have a party with a lot of his content creator buddies, which I can appreciate, right? Because there was an element of like VidCon,
Mhm.
where a lot of the creators are getting together and networking and doing that and doing
Yep.
panels. They had some interesting monetization of. I don't know if that's a fair way to say it, but I think they did a pretty good job of recognizing the value of the creators that they brought in, and there were
Mhm.
VIP tickets. They were very expensive. I know a lot of people bitched and moaned about it, but um it's not every day you get to bring in high caliber Mark Rober, Strange Parts,
Mhm.
Alan Pan, Backyard
Yep.
Scientist, like some top tier creators. And so, those that paid for it had access to private panels and discussions and meet and greets and events and all that stuff. And as a sponsor, we had access to some of that. And I say
Mhm.
we, like 3D Gloop and
Mhm.
uh, you guys employed me basically to contract
Yep.
and help with the activation around some of that. And I
Yep.
appreciated you guys for involving me with that. I think that was a really neat thing. It was also a really great experience to engage a kind of a different crowd than we were used to seeing,
Oh, it's completely different.
right?
Mhm. Yeah.
So definitely a lot of maker overlap, but there was definitely like content creators and just average like tech people,
Yep.
all walks of life. I
Yep.
think Gloop got some pretty good exposure. There were it's so
Mhm.
funny having been in a shared space with you for a long time, like to see the number of people come up and go, "What is Gloop?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah,
Mhm.
that's right. These people don't even know what this
Yeah.
is, right? We're not in
Yeah.
our normal group of people."
Mhm. Yeah, no, I mean it was a fantastic event and I'm excited. I know there are already talks for next year and as a sponsor we've already gotten some communication back from them as well. So look forward to us helping put on doing our part as sponsoring the event in 2024. So it's going to be exciting to say the least.
Um, so how would you, as a business, as a small business,
Mhm.
especially right
Oh,
now,
yes.
the
Mhm.
I don't know, I'm not going to put you too much on the spot, but when you're
Sure.
looking at your ROI in terms of
Mhm.
like the sponsorship fees that you paid, and then
Mhm.
all of the money that you spent for Jeff
Oh,
and
yeah.
the activation and the booth space,
Mhm.
that was a that was
It
more than you'd spent on any
so
other marketing endeavor by far, right?
it was more money than we had probably made in the first, like, year of our existence. Let's put it that way. When it's
Wow.
all said and done, I cannot believe when I saw the dollar figure how much money we actually spent. Being a bootstrapped business,
Yeah.
coming up from quite literally nothing,
Yeah.
you go through making your first dollar to making your first 100 to 1,000, eventually 100,000. The amount of money that we put into this, was, it was crazy. I'm not trying to brag here. It was just like, it's as a small business, it kind of hurt to say like we could have taken that money and done it other things. But the way that I see it was this was an opportunity to get in on the ground floor of an event that I felt had a lot of potential. Also at the same time, it's a long game. Like this is chess moves that we are playing six,
Absolutely.
8 moves ahead. We can't be thinking about the pieces that we've got, where they are right now. We've got to be thinking where, things are going to end up after there's some play that's happening. And so that's really what this was about.
Right.
In terms of effectiveness, it was a huge sunk cost. But what it did was it got us out to a whole new market. It got so many new connections to some top level influencers. We got to network and just mingle with them. We came back with a few new friends. Just a good honest time. Like it was fantastic. So in the future, as we continue to grow, that number is going to it's going to go up, like the amount of money that we're gonna have to spend for sponsoring and other things
Yeah.
like that. But in the scheme of things, it's becoming smaller and smaller and smaller portions of the revenue that we're bringing in.
Right.
So
And first of all, let me just say, I got to shout out to William and his team. They made
mhm,
massive concessions for
massive.
year one sponsors, like smoking
Hmm.
deal as if to for it was a ton of money for you to spend as a small business, but
Hmm.
in the scope of like what an event like this would cost a business to be part of,
Hmm.
like they
Yep.
they made massive concessions, and part of that
And if
was
it wasn't for them,
yeah,
yeah, I was gonna say if it wasn't for them willing to make those concessions, we wouldn't have been able to do
wouldn't
it.
have been able to
There's
do it.
just no way.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So
Exactly.
I think there's something actually that's really like endearing about that. And I hope, in talking to them and moving forward, and we've talked about this in the past too, but having, I'd say like some concessions for small business, or like maybe do a sliding scale for people that are up and coming, or some
Hmm.
reciprocity. So I think part of the value that you brought was some spectacle, right?
Yep.
That Jeff was totally on brand, and you got them excited. They were willing to come down on what they were going to charge you for sponsorship because you were showing up with something that was
Yep.
totally on brand. This
Hmm.
man versus machine tug of war thing, and while it didn't go exactly the way that we had hoped, we
Hmm.
learned a lot of
Yeah.
things. And I
Hmm.
think it was a win-win when you look at, again, you're doing networking, relationship building. You're getting access to a group, an audience that you wouldn't otherwise have. That's new. You're bringing new people into the fold, which is
Absolutely.
fantastic.
Hmm.
So like a lot of really great things happen, but like you said, you have to have faith that like this is long-term branding spend, right?
Yes.
And
Hmm.
unfortunately, when you're a small business, like you don't tend to have funds to
Hmm.
spend on branding plays in the same way,
Hmm.
right? Because every dollar counts.
Yes.
And you're constantly doing that calculus of
Hmm.
opportunity cost. When
Yep.
if I'm spending $10,000 here, that's $10,000 I do not have to do X, Y, and Z, which I desperately also need to do.
Hmm.
So thinking outside of the box, reminding yourself that whenever you're pitching anything in business, I
Hmm.
would just say like there needs to be mutually beneficial things. And so when you start getting outside the box, I'm like, okay, well, if we can't come with all the cash that you want, like if open sauce was getting all the cash that they wanted for that sponsorship, we're probably talking what, 25, 30K, 40K upwards,
Hmm.
for primo title
Hmm.
sponsorship on the homepage,
Yep.
banners up and everything, the way they did. I mean, they
Yep.
pulled out all the stops. It was an amazing value in terms of that.
Hmm.
Um,
Yep.
but that's so much money as a small business,
Hmm.
right? That we just, most people don't even have the luxury of coming up with. So what I'm getting
Hmm.
at is you got to be thinking about the win-win. Well, what I can't come up with all that cash, but maybe I can bring value in terms of like things people are going to get excited about that they can market. Like we're going to have this exhibit and all that stuff. And I would have, if I'm being honest, I think it would have been nice if there was a little bit more visibility or utilization of that. But again, with the fog of war and the chaos of the first year and like uncertainty about whether or not we could even do
There,
it, if it was going to
yeah,
pass
there were
inspection.
so many things to jump through, so many like last minute gotchas that we had to
Oh my
figure out how to
God.
put them out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like it was I mean, I am happy how the event came out and everything else, and I'm looking forward to the next event, which here for us is going to be Earth,
Yeah.
and Jeff is going to show up at Earth.
Woo-woo.
He's not, it was an investment for us, so a lot of this cost also went into, yes, purchasing Jeff, purchasing the truck, purchasing the stuff to get us to these events. So again, it was more of a calculated play.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm excited, really looking forward to the future. Because we've laid a lot of really awesome groundwork.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and that's true, and that hopefully that proves to be a worthwhile
Hmm.
investment because it's something that's memorable. So I always say like spectacle is a fantastic value from marketing standpoint because these are the things that people remember when they go to this
Yes.
event and they're like, remember that tug of war thing? Like they're not going to remember all the booths they
Hmm.
walked around to and stuff like that. And I think there's ways to put on entertainment that are not nearly as costly. But if you're thinking about little takeaway nuggets for your business or something you have in the future, like think about like what's gonna make people remember you. Because I've said a number of podcasts over and over, like you don't have a sales problem, you have an awareness problem, and one of the best things you can do to combat awareness is being remembered for things, right?
Yep.
And having people tell do your advertising for you. Like, oh my gosh, I went to this event and we did this tug of war against this robot, and then people are like, wait, what?
Hmm.
What was that? And all that stuff. And
Yeah.
think about the permanence of seeing like your brand stenciled across the edge of Jeff, and how much
Hmm.
more visible that is than just like the banner blindness that we all see with all the promo ads posted everywhere and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
so anyway, kudos to you for making that happen. I mean, you guys, listen, like, what was it, a week, maybe 2 weeks ahead? They were like, we can't do the robot.
It was
Like
like two
after it
weeks.
was all,
Yeah.
it was purchased,
Yeah.
the programming was on, the
The
truck
money
was
was
on,
spent. Yeah.
like
Yeah.
we were freaking out, right? And we're like, okay, what's the
Yep.
problem? Let's work the problem. Let's figure it out. It was an
Yep.
issue,
Yep.
it was an issue with the fire marshal and things being approved or potentially being too tall or any of this stuff. And at the end of the day, like we figured out a way to like get it done, and it was,
Yep.
but man, was that stressful.
Yes. To say the least.
Right,
So
right, right, right.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
that was just one event. The other two, well, we can gloss over the other ones. We did a trip after that. We road tripped up
Hmm.
to the Protopasta event with
Yep.
Joel and for Amy's charity, the STEM, the Women in STEM
Hmm.
charity 3D printer giveaway. Let's see, Repkord contributed like I think 12 or 14 machines for that, and I realized I like left 2 behind that I wanted to, so we'll have to save that for the next one. That was an awesome time. Alex
Yeah.
hosted
That's a cool thing.
us, which we were really appreciative of, and met another group there.
Hmm.
We did a little filament making thing, which is always fun when we
Hmm.
get to Protopasta. So if you're up in the Pacific Northwest and want to support an awesome group of people, Protopasta is right there, and they've got a fantastic proto plant where they make all that fresh
Hmm.
plasticky for the 3D printings. And then let's see. Did you have any other events after that? I pushed
No,
on
that
to LTX after
you
that.
went to
That
LTX.
was
Yep.
the Linus Tech Expo, which was awesome. I was a rep for Prusa there, and we showed off the Excel and some new stuff. And that was really cool too, because again, that engaged a whole nother crowd that I didn't get to interact with normally, right? Like these are tech people. So there's like, when you look at
Hmm.
the Venn diagram of people that are into tech and people that are into 3D printing, like
Yeah.
definitely clear overlap.
Hmm.
But still a lot of people that are like, they're just kind of waiting in the wings. We're like, I don't know if I have an application for 3D printing, but then they get and see that like that booth space. First of all, they allocated just like a tiny little thing for like all the 3D printing companies. So Prusa was there, Hedamami was there,
Hmm.
Pantheon, Bamboo, and 3D Print Canada all shared this little like 20 by 20 space, and it was packed the entire
Hmm.
time, right? And so,
Yep.
shout out Colton and his team that organized. They're like, yeah, we're gonna allocate more because it was a good different thing for them to show off than just the normal like here's some computers and video cards and WAN stuff and the things that Linus is known for.
Hmm.
So it's always cool to see like kind of crowds overlap and ideas forming like for people that are like in business and they're like, oh, what would be cool if we started 3D printing some of these like, custom case mods or, when you start
Mm,
to see these like
yeah.
cool application overlaps and people like the light bulb goes off in terms of
Yeah.
opportunity for leveraging the tool set for business in a different way. So I think there's a ton of cool opportunity in there.
Oh yes,
And I
absolutely.
know you were considering going up there, but that probably would have been a bit much with the timing of it all. And but maybe a possibility
Hmm.
for the future.
Oh,
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. There are a lot of things like as 3D Gloop continues to grow, we're constantly looking at what the next, sort of thing looks like on the horizon for us. And attending these trade shows and events are a huge, like a huge mover for getting our brand out there, getting awareness. And it's the reason why we exist. Had we not gone to Earth back in 2018, we wouldn't be here.
right,
Um,
right,
so it will always be part of our DNA. So
right.
absolutely, really looking forward to the next events. Maybe one day you'll see us in a rapid, showing off
Yeah,
industrial pieces.
I don't doubt it in the least. You know, I am a massive advocate of attending events. If you're
Hmm.
getting into the space and the sooner you can to get your brand out there and just to network and interact. I mean, what I'm an advocate for is actually like networking and FaceTime with
Hmm.
people,
Hmm.
which frankly is becoming a lost art in the virtual world that we live in. But
Oh, absolutely.
again applies an object permanence to things when it's like no. I had a conversation with Andrew, with Pooch, whatever, and that
Hmm.
is way more powerful than like the live streams and trying to interact with people virtually, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
Actually, on that note, you got an opportunity to meet up with Loyal Moses while you were up in
Oh yes. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I think you were saying you had some interesting conversations around that because I know he's got a he does a lot of live
Hmm.
streaming and is working on building 3D printing
Yeah.
community stuff and
You know,
all that and having discussions around that.
I'll say this,
Hmm.
knowing someone online versus meeting them in person, it is two completely different worlds. I mean, you can kind of get to know someone online and their presence and like who they might be, but when you get to meet them in person and get to see the contextual pieces that many people don't see, the body language, the way they
Yeah,
hold themselves, the way they talk, the way they phrase the
essence,
words,
right?
exactly. It's completely different, and it was a pleasure. It was honestly a real pleasure getting to meet Loyal in person. It was really cool. It was on my way home. Was able to swing on by and chat with him. Loyal and Patrick actually made our safety
Oh
helmets
my god, they
for
did such an amazing job with that
amazing
too.
job.
Yeah, the safety
Hmm.
helmets for the Jeff Tug of War Expo. So that was
Hmm.
so part of the memorable experience too, right? Like Alan
Yes.
Pan had that pot helmet on, which was just hilarious.
Hmm. Yep.
And then a lot of the other creators, wearing Mando helmets and the bunny helmet that Loyal made, and oh, it's
Hmm.
just so good. And Polymaker like sponsored a bunch of filament for it. It was a really
Hmm.
cool combination of a couple of awesome people that I don't feel like we gave nearly enough like shout out
We
to like
didn't.
because of the chaos of the whole thing.
But moving forward, there's some new things that we're working on, and hopefully we'll have some helmet contests and some new like projects overall. So I think there'll be ways in which we can leverage that. But
Yeah.
getting back to the meeting people, like going out to these events and meeting people in person, there's something to be said for it. Like really changing perspective and understandings of whether it's a product, whether it's a service, whether it's an individual,
Yeah.
just by themselves.
Yeah.
It was awesome. I'm really looking forward to seeing more people come to these events. Obviously, I can't speak for everyone, but I want to see everyone start coming to these events because we're all a big family.
We are, and like I said, these are my people a lot of the time.
Hmm.
I'm gonna share a little secret with you guys. I'm gonna get in here close. I am a highly extroverted individual, and by that
Really?
I mean like I derive massive amounts of energy from just interacting with people, and I know that comes as a surprise to a lot of you guys, but that is very true for me. And when I don't get enough of that, like, yes, it can be draining. It takes a lot of energy,
The doom
obviously,
and
to
gloom
interact.
pooch.
But I do best when I am like out amongst my people, which is why I think I invest so much in it, and that's like where I seem to excel in a lot of what I
Hmm.
do. Um, I know that COVID times were tough for a lot of people, but they were also beneficial. I had a number of conversations with some awesome creators at Open Source about this, because a lot of them made their name in COVID times where because they were introverted individuals where they thrived just being
Hmm.
forced to stay in and to develop and to hone their craft and to work on stuff. And a few of them surprised me too, because I think a lot of class of what I would call like extroverted introverts like came out where
Hmm.
outwardly they present as very bombastic and energetic, and like you would just expect that when you meet them in person that they're just like larger than life the way they are in their online persona, but they're actually
Hmm.
very shy and overwhelmed and timid and stuff like that, because you're flexing completely different muscles when you're doing this stuff in front of a camera versus in person.
Hmm.
And that was really interesting. I had a number of good conversations. One of my favorite meets at Open Source was Maddie XB, Unnecessary Inventions. If you guys don't know who that is, or you need to check him out, he is hilarious. He's a very talented, like I would say, like comedy writer, and his intersection of education and entertainment. Education is relative. I call it edutainment, right? Like the mixture of like I'm trying to be entertaining and
Hmm.
silly, and he's developed product. The shtick is like they're unnecessary, like they're ridiculous, right?
Hmm.
But he's actually made sellable product, and he's like got a data gold mine in terms of like he puts all these things out there, he gets all this feedback, and he's like, that actually might be worth making a Mark Zuckerberg bath mat because people just want that because it's silly. um so how unnecessary it actually is interesting, but I think he found a really good shtick in that he was one of those individuals where he comes across larger than life, amazing, super energetic on camera, but
Hmm.
he was actually a little bit more subdued. I think feeling a little bit more overwhelmed, and I got to talk to him about his process and how he still does his own editing and shoots his own stuff, and I think he kind of likes it that way. He's got a fantastic studio space, really awesome, down to earth guy. I love everything
Hmm.
about him. I support everything he does. I would watch anything and everything all the time from Maddie. So go check him out. Shout out to Unnecessary Inventions. Um, let's give a couple more shout outs while we can to the chat.
Yeah.
Good to see some new people. Twenty 30 experience. I don't know how to pronounce that. Gtech Studio. Good to see you guys. What up to
Yeah.
you?
Ryan, how's it going, Ryan?
Hopefully see you, Ryan, and the misses at Earth this year. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, oh, they'll be
Mike,
there.
Mike, never let the machines win. Yes, I'm coming out of my shell very slowly, Mike. Uh, okay, let me. It was an event packed summer,
Yes.
and we didn't even get to go to all of them. I love that, and we've got some pretty key events up and coming for the fall.
Hmm.
Earth being a big one, and then there's Form Next in Germany for any of our EU folks that might be on and listening,
Hmm.
and then the Sanjay Memorial Rep Rap Festival, the first annual one of those in the UK, which is also hopefully going to be pretty big coming up in the Oxford area of the UK. So I'm excited for those events. Yeah, get to what you can, even if it's just the smaller mini maker fairs or whatever. Interact with people, get ideas, get your businesses out there. You know, I don't
Hmm.
know. That's probably good on PSAs for events.
Yeah.
I'd like to take a moment if we can, and we've got like 10 minutes left. So, you know, talk
We
up,
ramble too much.
talk about, yeah, it's kind of what we do, little nuggets with some rabbit holing here and there, but hopefully it's fun and entertaining for you guys. Um, so we mentioned like you're going through some pretty serious growth, which is
Hmm.
fantastic. You've gotten some great grants and supports from the city of St. Louis,
Hmm.
and some entities out there, which is awesome to see. And I mentioned earlier, like my mea culpa, that my challenges are
Hmm.
contraction. And if I'm being
Yeah.
honest, you guys, I'm at an interesting crossroads at this point with Repkord, where for the first time I had to do a layoff, which really affected me a
Yeah.
lot more than I thought it would. I mean, it's part of the comes with the territory when you have people. Um, when the money's not there, like you got to cut
Hmm.
everywhere you can, and payroll is far and away my largest expense.
Hmm.
Uh, that was really tough because I took that really hard because I felt like it was a failure of commitment toward, some of the people that have been with me for years. This is an individual that was helping me for
Hmm.
years now. That that I valued his contributions as an employee and a friend for a lot, and he made a ton of concessions to come on and work
Yeah.
with me and to be able to not deliver, um, in terms of like the opportunity to grow and get
Hmm.
paid what he was actually worth and all that stuff. I was massively depressed about that for a while, if I'm being honest,
Hmm.
because I think, part of my challenge is as a manager of people, I probably sometimes get too emotionally invested, you know. And
Yeah.
and I think there's difference of opinions in terms of like how to operate. From a business standpoint, it's just the reality of what it is. And these are tough decisions that you have to make sometimes and things that you have to do. But as a human, I probably get a little bit too close and too invested sometimes in that.
Hmm.
And so that was tough. And then, as a follow on to that, like 2 weeks ago, my last individual that was left gave his notice, and so
Oh.
now
Hmm.
at the moment Repcord is down to a force of one again.
Hmm.
Which, again, at first I was like, this feels like failure to some extent, but I stopped thinking about it. It was like, okay, well, I think there's a vanity metric sometimes in the idea of like how many employees that
Hmm.
you have, right?
Sure.
In
Hmm.
the sense that like that gives people some sort of sense of like the size of your operation, and to feel
Yep.
like I have nobody else now. One, because of who I am and like just being alone in place, that's not good for me in terms of operating in
Hmm.
general, like mentally, all that stuff.
Hmm.
But two, feels like we're just moving in the wrong direction. And it's not to say that I can't hire more people and do all this other stuff, but it's given me an interesting opportunity to kind of retreat back while sales are slower and all that stuff, and like, okay, well, what's the plan for the future? What are the learning opportunities here? Where
Hmm.
do we go? Um, and why did it happen? Right.
Yeah.
Um, I'm not one to just kind of like rest on like the common thread that people say, like, well, it's a challenge right now. Everybody's contracting. The market's not as good. People's
Hmm.
disposable income isn't as high as it once was. Economy, inflation,
Yeah.
Europe, all this stuff. We had a kind of, I don't want to say a perfect storm, but a lot of negative things
Hmm.
happened all at the same time. We lost some resellers in Europe. I was way too tied. I had too much money tied up in some pretty big accounts that bottom
Hmm.
fell out from under. I spent a lot of money investing in scaling manufacturing opportunities,
Hmm.
buying equipment, setting up process, only to
Yep.
find that we had way, way, way too much capacity and not nearly enough demand.
Yep.
Manufacturing is so hard, and it
It
is
is.
infinitely harder in California, where labor costs are incredibly high, legal costs, insurance costs, all of it, everything. Probably
Yep.
one of the most expensive places to operate a
Yep.
manufacturing thing, even a bespoke one like ours that was
Hmm.
tiny. it's almost silly for me to call it manufacturing. I mean, it is manufacturing, but it just doesn't. It
Yeah.
doesn't feel like, we're a kind of a job shop or whatever. But when we did the calcs, like on our capacity, like we had the ability, I think, to make. We scaled up to the ability to meet the demand of like a few hundred boxes a week, which
Wow.
um, which in our heyday, in the golden era of rep boxing, like was actually within reach during peak
Yeah.
season. Um, and demand does pick up back up again, but it's become very clear as my cost of labor has increased, as my cost of materials is increased. Like what I have, my product does not scale, and
Hmm.
and the challenges around like as your cost as my price has to go up because I can't
Hmm.
operate as a business like at a loss, right?
Hmm.
Duh. That's the whole reason we're here. Um, and so having that come to Jesus moment around like, man, I don't want
Hmm.
to relinquish control of manufacturing. I don't want to
Yeah.
potentially lose that quality and that closeness to the product.
Yeah.
But if I can't compete, if I can't sell, and I don't exist, I can't win either, right?
Hmm.
We've talked about made in the USA before and all this stuff. Like I want to, people talk a good game when it comes to like wanting to support local companies and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, the data is so tied to how price centric things are. The
Yep.
reason we were doing well at volume was like our prices were like 20 to 30% less what it is now, what it's had to become.
Hmm.
And for a given product of a specific thing, like there is a cap on what people are willing to spend because at some point your number of people that are willing to like invest in something like a rep box versus just going and getting a Tupperware and drilling holes in it like gets less and less and less and
Yep.
less. I know
Yep.
that. I know that. But uh we were going the wrong direction. Like if I can get the
Hmm.
cost of the box back down into like reasonable space again, I
Hmm.
suspect we'll see a dramatic change. But I don't know, guys. The a lot of the challenges that I had around, and a lot of the things, frankly, I don't do as well. Like I can do manufacturing process and all that stuff, but that's not my strength.
Hmm.
Um, the hard decisions I need to make in terms of like, well, maybe I offload some of these things that have been challenging. Like less worrying about employees setting lasers on fire and stuff, and then
Yeah.
it pivots more toward a, a a cash intensivity of like having to order larger volumes of stuff, have it, sell through it, reorder,
Hmm. Yep.
keep an eye on quality process. I mean, there's no guarantee other ways, but the product will be cheaper if I make it overseas, no doubt.
Hmm. Yeah.
What do you guys think? Tell me in the chat. What do you think? Like, I am at an interesting crossroads. Like, I don't know. It's like we've built a
Yeah.
lot of brand reputation and space and all this stuff. I don't want to just see it die on the vine. I love it. It's a passion
Hmm.
of mine. I still think there's lots of opportunity there, but I don't have the opportunity to just go to the Midwest where labor is cheaper and I can source materials easier and pay less for
Hmm.
freight and all that stuff and for
Hmm.
facility.
Yeah.
So at least not for the foreseeable while my kids and family are here.
Hmm.
What choice does that leave me? I don't know.
Yeah.
You
I
guys
mean,
airing my dirty laundry in front of everyone. I feel exposed.
I appreciate you sharing that. I think that it's tough. And a lot of business owners will and do go through many similar things.
Yeah.
There are always challenges. I mean, let's be honest. It takes grit to be an entrepreneur. But I think sometimes,
A lot
there's
of
a
grit.
difference between foolish stubbornness and actual heroic persistence. And sometimes that is
Yes.
really just knowing when it's time to grit your teeth together and turn around
Yeah.
instead of pushing forward on a path that doesn't lead to a success.
Yeah.
And in many cases, I mean, I don't have all the answers,
Yeah.
but I know that we've had conversations offline. I think, there's opportunities there.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
and I'm here to support. you in every way that
I
I
know you
can.
are, and I appreciate you for that, buddy. And I want to take a couple comments here from the
Yeah.
chat, because this is stuff that I've spent way too much time as an overthinker, just noodling.
Hmm.
The first from Vast CNC, great question. Do I think some of the contraction could be tied to commitment to open source and people producing designs rather than purchasing? I think that that's a common talking point and a fear around open source stuff. One, I don't have as much open source stuff as I think people sometimes think I do. Like, we have the rep rack. That was really never intended to be uh, a product that I wanted to produce regularly. Like, we support it. Like, I'll sell, like, the
You saw
brackets and the
laser cut
screws. We'll sell
versions.
laser cut
Yeah.
versions of it and stuff. It's just kind of a support thing. But because the
Hmm.
bulk of that product is like tied to EMT, which is not practical for me to ship and stuff, and is just ubiquitous and cheap at every major home store in the US at least. Um,
Hmm.
it was a perfect opportunity to just do like a goodwill piece, to get that out there, just share it, let people make them however they want, and I think that's brought a lot of value in terms of visibility back to us. I don't think I've really left a ton of revenue on the table by like just putting that out there. The other open source stuff we've got, the only other one was like the rep winder. And there was like enough complexity in the non-printable parts where people really, it wasn't practical for them to source their own, and so we sold a
Mm.
lot of those kits. I would argue in a lot of cases, like, open source is actually the more beneficial in terms of the goodwill and the size of the community and the market that you can build up. I mean, look at something
Hmm.
like the Voron project. Yeah, well, yes, like, maybe Max and team like could have captured a lot more of that than, say, LDO or the companies that produce the kits and actually sell and make the money off of it. But they determined, like, they didn't want to deal with the head. It's hard. Manufacturing is hard.
It is hard. Hmm.
And let's be honest, like, competing with a powerhouse like China, like, that's just built to build to make,
Hmm.
is, you're never going to be able to outproduce them in terms of raw manufacturing ability. Um, the where you do is like our ability to market and engage audience in a different
Hmm.
way, to innovate, to do R&D and stuff like that. That's a lot harder for Chinese and
Hmm.
overseas companies to come to. So that's kind of my first take on the um, open source versus keeping it closed. What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I mean, I absolutely agree. In terms of open source, I mean, you will have people that will want to build their own, and there will be people who go and do that.
Yeah.
But a vast majority, I think we're seeing this in a market today with the 3D printers. Like, no one cares anymore. There are people that do, but the vast majority of people, the people that are voting with their dollars,
Right.
they're voting saying, I just want something that I can buy
Yeah.
that's a relatively cheap cost that provides me a value that I perceive
Right.
is there, and that's it.
I would
You will always
argue
have.
I would argue that a
Yeah,
lot of people, like anybody that wants to make their own anyway, is probably not a customer of yours to begin with.
mm,
Like, they want to make their
exactly.
own, right? And so
Hmm.
so aren't you better off winning some goodwill and some support for maybe a future product, or
Hmm.
when they decide, because like you said, we're always trading time for dollars and vice versa. And so when
Yep.
you don't have money and you have time to put toward things, but a lot of the open source products that are out there, they're not cheap either. Like, building a
No,
Voron kit is not cheap.
it's not.
There
We're
are
building one right now.
inexpensive
Yeah.
opportunities and stuff, but most people, when they start going down that road, they realize, wait, it's actually not, like, it's going to cost me more to make my own, to source.
Hmm.
When I factor in sourcing the things, I can't source parts in
Hmm.
quantity that makes sense. Like, I only need 10 screws, but I can't buy less than 1,000 of these or whatever. So those are my feels on that. It's not all the time, but again, when you're looking at the overall big picture, I would agree with you. The vast majority of people, like, they would much rather spend money than the time
Hmm.
and the
Yep.
energy. Um,
Hmm.
so as a business focus, so I think you can get a lot. I think people can be getting a lot more value out of opening up stuff. I would love to do more open stuff, more community stuff, because I love community stuff.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
and I think that comes back to you in different ways. Maybe it's not a direct dollar tie all the time, but again, if you can build up awareness, that's
Hmm.
that long game stuff we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
The other, well, there's more comments in here, but the 3D printing professor comments on something that I've spent countless
Mm-hmm.
sleeping nights on, right? Like
Yep.
we figured out how to manufacture and figure out what to manufacture is better. And it might be time to diversify. So I believe, and we've talked at length about this,
Mm-hmm.
part of the reason I had struggled is that I think I fell into the very common entrepreneurial trap of going wide before I went
Mm-hmm.
deep. And by that I
Yep.
mean we have this inherent fear of risk by of putting all our eggs in one basket, right? If I
Mm-hmm.
have one product that I am known for, let's say it's a
Mm-hmm.
storage box for storing filament,
Mm-hmm.
my first pass, especially as a maker, this is the fallacy of the maker too, is like, well, I don't want to
Mm-hmm.
make the same thing over and over again. I want to show that I can innovate and I'm creative and we have way more to offer. And we do. And I do. And I
Mm-hmm.
love doing that stuff. And that is really hard to repress. But from a
Yep.
business standpoint, as a scalable, full time
Mm-hmm.
supporting you business,
Mm-hmm.
when you are bootstrapped and you are lean, if you do not have the resources, if you do not have like R&D and
Mm-hmm.
time it takes to get new product online, and
Mm-hmm.
again, it depends on what your product is. If we're just talking about taking designs that can be 3D printed and selling those things, that is not the same.
That's something else.
That
Yeah.
is not the same as like actually
Yeah.
physical, tangible kits of stuff, doing build guides, doing customer support. It's because the thing that most people look at is like, well, I can build this box. It's not hard, and I can
Mm-hmm.
manufacture this box, and it's not hard. No, the making of the box itself is actually like probably only 25% of the battle,
Mm-hmm.
if that. Right? It's like all these little support things that nobody thinks about. How do I package this thing? How do we improve the packaging so that it can go overseas and international? How do I do the build guide? How do I make the build guide in 5 different languages in 5 different modes that people
Mm-hmm.
can understand, right? Because not everybody gets watching a video or wants to watch a video, so they want the build guide, they want the online it's like a full-time job just supporting like a very very basic assembly thing.
Yep.
So then your choice becomes like, well, maybe you don't do kits and you just like, we save a lot. I've had a lot of conversations with 3D Chameleon Bill. He's like, we're not even offering a kit anymore. We found that it's just cheap. And I apologize, Bill, if this is like sharing your stuff, but I think this is something I think a lot of as well. Am
Mm-hmm.
I better off saving all these headaches of like dealing with the build guide and problems and customer support issues of people just not following instructions, breaking stuff, reship stuff by just
Mm-hmm.
offering a fully assembled one and saying,
We talked ad nauseum about this.
yep.
I remember coming out to your shop and talking through this.
But again,
You know.
because
Mm-hmm.
that leans
Yep.
heavily into all the things that we don't do well, meaning like I have to pay, like labor is expensive
Yep.
here.
Yep.
Manufacturing is a challenge. My cost of materials has gone up 40 something percent over the last 16 months.
Yep.
Which is just like like constant, just knife in the back, knife in the back, knife in the back.
Yeah.
And I can only eke so much more value out of saying like, oh, but it's better, it's marginally better. We got the ceiling better. The acrylic is better than MDF. All these other things.
Yep.
It's only so much better I can make it where it's just, yeah, but that's out of reach. It's not practical. I don't want to spend $400 or $500 on just like this like bling box, you
Mm-hmm.
know. There's been a lot of like swallowing some pride, making some hard decisions. Like I don't think that I'm egotistical around it, but there are times where I feel like I've been holding on to
Mm-hmm.
something the way it is when there's been a shift and I'm at a pivot point, right? Like I need to adapt or die.
Mm-hmm.
If I am
Yeah.
priced out of where I need to be selling a specific product line, I either need to shift to a completely different product line. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and 3D printing professor is right. Like I think there is a time where you need to hedge, but it's like, no, you need
Mm-hmm.
to sell a lot more. You need to
And
focus on engaging and like
mhm.
maximizing with what you have before you go wide, is my
I
opinion.
mean, there are so many times I wish, like, I'm a maker entrepreneur myself. Like, I see all of these things I want to be able to build, I want to be able to make, and I'm like, hey, there's a product here. There's something that I could potentially sell. We have 3 products. That's all we have at Gloop. We've had the same 3 products since 2019.
Well,
I have
and
not
you've killed
introduced
one of them. You've actually kind of killed
one of them.
off.
We've killed.
Yeah.
One of
So
them we've killed off.
yeah.
And I mean, I'm not saying that the laser focus will make you successful. there are things in which I know that we could be doing better here, but intentionally holding off. We have three other product lines that we've spent tons of money, tons of time in the R&D. But what Alan was talking about in terms of getting packaging together so they can ship, in terms of the support, in terms of making for sure you put some marketing material around this, all of the ancillary items that go into an additional product, going wider, it takes so much more time,
Yep.
and it's hard for us to support. And then terms of trying to figure out how to manufacture those things and all of the processes that people don't see on the back end, it's difficult. In many cases, I think in entrepreneurs, like in general, in all walks, whether you're a maker or just a general entrepreneur, you have to be super focused on what it is that you're doing and do that one thing better than anyone else could ever do it.
Yep.
You know,
One
and
thing,
that's it.
and well, I mean, what's the common wisdom? Like you see this in like a lot of entrepreneur texts. It's like, sell what you have
Hmm.
before you scale it, right? Or like,
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
think that the dangers of trying to scale too fast
Hmm.
or flailing around, like we've said this before, like focus is so key, but and it's opportunity cost, right? Because we think
Yep.
like, oh, I want to do this product, I want to be like, no, that's just makers being makers. Like, I want to make all these cool things. Oh, would you buy this? Would
Hmm.
you buy this? Would you buy this? But man, is R&D time
Hmm.
consuming, intensive, and all that stuff. Part of
Yeah.
the reason I had to let go one of my guys, he was fantastic at the R&D and all that stuff. I wasn't in a place where I could support that, and I was holding on too long because I wanted his talent and his skills. He was a great CAD guy and like all this stuff, but it just didn't have the
Yeah.
revenue tied to it. It took too long to actuate. He was the brains behind like a part of our turntable product and all this stuff.
Hmm.
And it just, while I still believe that that's a fantastic product and has the potential to exceed the original rep box,
Hmm.
I don't. My other admission, we ran out of cash, guys. Like
Hmm.
we talk about how important cash flow is. Like
Hmm.
I literally was at the point where it's like the bank account was like this close
Yeah.
to zero. For all intents and purposes, we were out of
It was
cash,
0. Hmm.
and
Yeah.
I was like,
Hmm.
what do I do? I'm like cutting everything I can and like all this stuff. I mean, like, and this is just, it's funny because in your personal life, you were like, if you're out of cash, you're bankrupt.
You're
Um,
bankrupt. You can't survive anymore.
in the business world, and unfortunately with consumer debt and all this stuff, like I think we have
Hmm.
this ability to kind of like delay or put off, or it makes it
Yeah.
too easy to not confront that problem because you can just start taking on debt. And I am
Hmm.
very, very, very debt averse, right? Like I'm
Hmm.
like, nope, we're falling out of sustainability here. We need to
Hmm.
contract. And it sucked. It sucked so bad, but I'm like, okay, this is what we got to do. Got to do layoffs.
Hmm.
Got to cut these things. Not going to do this. It's like I want to. Unfortunately, I don't have the capacity to produce all the product lines that we do anymore. So it's like I've had to be like, okay, we got to go back to our roots. We got to refine this. I got to course correct. Um, in the world of entrepreneur stuff, there's so many people that can tell stories about like, yeah, we ran out of cash and then we did fundraising or we did this. It's like it's just like a thing that happens, and
Hmm.
it is a solvable problem. Like as much as it
Yeah.
feels like, oh my gosh, like we've gone under.
Hmm.
Um, thankfully I'm in a point where it's like, yeah, I can not pay myself and I can kind of correct. Like I've got, because I don't have all my eggs in one basket and stuff like that. It's not the end of the world, but it's really, really when you're,
Hmm.
when times get tough, it really makes you, check your mettle and
Yeah.
decide what you want to do. So I've started looking at it as like, okay, this is an opportunity to refocus and make some tough choices. And a lot of times, I mean, for weeks and weeks, it just felt like I was just picking between the lesser of two terrible choices, right? And
Yeah.
that's just the way it goes sometimes.
Hmm.
And so and then to have a conversation with you where you're just like, we're growing like crazy and all this stuff, and I'm like, dude, are we even working in the same environment? And it's so dependent on
Yeah.
what your product is and where you're at, and
Hmm.
you have a completely different profile
Hmm.
of
Yeah.
customer, right?
Completely
You're in
different. I mean,
impulse buy land, and you very
hmm.
unique in your offering. Like, yeah, I guess you're competing
Hmm.
with what CA glue,
Yeah.
but not
Well, I mean,
really.
I mean, but they're at any moment, something can happen. Regulations can change. A new competitor can come out, and it
Sure.
completely could ruin our business. Now, that's the other thing where it's like diversifying does make sense, and like that's what I'm working on, trying to figure out, okay, I've taken it to a point where things are growing, the machine is running, and we're generating consistent revenue now.
Right.
And now it's time to start diversifying.
Right.
But every business is different, unfortunately. So we can't provide the advice of, hey, this is what we did. You have to just follow this footstep. I mean, I think in many cases, being an entrepreneur is going through these filters, and it's basically tearing yourself up to go through these filters because it makes you a better entrepreneur on
Sure.
the outbound,
Sure.
you know. And I mean, I'm confident that you will come through this thing with flying colors. Like, it's going to hurt probably,
Oh, it has
but
hurt. It does hurt.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
but as you keep grinding those teeth together and
They're nubs. They're
backtracking a
just
little bit,
nubs. My dental hygiene
you
has
know,
never been poor. Um, it's yeah, and I sometimes we just have that hopeless optimism as entrepreneurs, as just like keep marching forward. But at some
mhm,
point, like you do have to have the conversations. Like, am I just marching into the ground? I think I did get to an actual low point where I was like, you know what we're doing is not working, and I just need a
mhm,
dramatic shift. Like something's got to change because like this is not sustainable. This isn't working anymore, and it takes like hitting rock bottom to like actually like snap you out of like this is not a good course. We are constantly falling into these things where it's like we try to draw trends with like here's what it's done
mhm,
historically and all this stuff, and so at the time when we were flying high, I was operating with the best information I had at the time.
mhm,
This is the trajectory that we are on. Unfortunately, like
mhm.
there was a combination of things, whether they're market driven or not, that I just you could argue
Yeah.
maybe I didn't prepare enough for. Maybe I was too aggressive in investing and
Mhm,
reinvesting rather than like growth. You just said like, oh, now's your time to diversify. I would disagree. I still think you have a
mhm.
lot of work to do to
Oh,
scale
yeah.
the product that you have.
Oh, absolutely. I wasn't trying to say like those are plans. I was just,
I know you
just
want to.
talking in
Yeah, yeah,
general.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, in generalities. But I mean, I think one of the things that has helped me recently is the idea as an entrepreneur of essentially building a challenge network of individuals. And I mean, this is how this podcast came out between Pooch and I. Like, we started talking about some of the challenges, some of the things that we were, like going through.
Right.
But I think there's actually some really cool merit to the idea of having more individuals of basically challenging thinking through all of these scenarios,
Yeah.
because for a while, like, I actually just recently started having a business counselor, like someone who comes in who's basically counseled other founding CEOs, presidents,
That's
whatever you
fantastic.
call it, and going
Mentorship,
through.
coaching, all very good, worthwhile things.
And so this individual has been kind of coaching and teaching me, and for the longest time I was of the mindset, it's like, we have to keep moving forward, we always just have to keep moving forward in every blind scenario.
Yeah.
And in some cases, like, this is where this mentor said, listen, sometimes you need to stop where you are, and you need to look and say, I need to backtrack.
Yeah.
And like, have some what they call confident humility here, and say, you have basically come up on top of Mount Stupid, and you've now realized it.
Yep.
And instead of continuing to march off the edge of the cliff, you got to go back down, and you got to turn around. And basically, this individual's been helping me kind of build up essentially a challenge network of individuals that are challenging me to go and do the next thing, to get to where I think I need to be.
Yeah.
And there's no real clear path to do that.
That's
But
fantastic, man. I
I think in many cases, like where you're at right now, this is the perfect opportunity to challenge yourself for future growth and continued change. Um, you know, I,
I'm really serious about having these come to Jesus, moments, and I don't know. I hope this is interesting to you guys because I'm really not trying to be
hopefully.
negative. I just think this is the kind of thing that just doesn't get shared very often because a lot of times there's just too many. Sometimes there's legal issues around like the negative things that
Hmm.
happen, like when businesses are struggling or failing or whatever. Again, I don't feel like I've failed. I think that there's opportunity here, but like when I am trying to step back and be like, okay, what do I do well? What do I not do well? What are my strengths? I do this. I love SWOT analyses, right? Like strengths,
Hmm.
weaknesses, opportunity, threat. If you guys don't know what that is, go look it up.
Yep.
Very, very easy exercise. Well, I don't want to say easy, but it should be an ongoing thing. It should
Yeah.
be something you regularly check in. Like, what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What are your opportunities? What are your threats?
Hmm.
Whiteboard it out. Okay. As a business, that's completely different than like what are Pooch's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats,
Hmm.
right? And right now, like there's a lot of overlap as a business and an individual.
Yeah.
I am one now, so it's one and the same. But yeah, no, what resources that I can bring to bear,
Hmm.
and what energy, what gets me out of bed in the morning, what I do well, what I don't do well,
Hmm.
all those things. And as a human, as a person, like on the soft skills, on the networking, on the sales, the marketing, the all that stuff, like I am engaged as can be, and I've had a decent amount of
Hmm.
success. I am a very average to below average, like manufacturer. I would say I'm an
Hmm.
average product designer, maybe slightly. But I mean, I don't know. You could rank all these things out. A manager of people. I think I'm a good interactor with individuals, but when it comes to actually managing them, I'm
Hmm.
willing to admit I'm not as good as I think I thought I was.
Hmm.
Because I have pretty high expectations, and
Yeah.
what I think I'm communicating clearly, and I'm not sometimes. Like some of the struggles that I've had with individuals that have worked for me in the past, I just get really irritated when it's just like they don't get it, right?
Hmm.
And I thought I've
Yep.
conveyed it, and they just still don't get it, or they don't want to, or they're being lazy, or whatever. And like, no, man, it's probably partially just me not doing that stuff, and it's a drag. There were days where it's just like I don't even want to go, and I don't want to deal with these people,
Hmm.
um, which is not a
Hmm.
healthy place to be. It's like avoiding your own
Avoiding your own
work,
business
of own business, because you're annoyed by the people that are in it. I mean, like that's
that
not.
you've hired. No.
Yeah, that's extreme. That's not
Yeah,
really.
I'm being silly.
Yeah. But I mean, I think we all
Yeah.
have our moments, right? Where it's just like
Yeah.
I can't be around, this
Yeah.
this circus right now. Ethan Coulter asks, can I share if I have thoughts of any alternative directions? Um, yeah, of course. I have many thoughts of what I want to share at the moment. I'm just gonna say I'm evaluating every opportunity. I think as an entrepreneur, I'll just say this, that I've always said that having to go back to work for somebody else it feels like that would be failure to me. Um, and that's that is got a huge asterisk next to it, depending on like what the capacity of that is. Like I've actually found some good success doing some consulting work in the short term.
Hmm.
So where maybe I'm not like directly employed, like collecting a paycheck, doing the W-2 thing, but like some of the
Hmm.
collabs that like you and I have done,
To say
and some other
we've.
businesses,
Hmm.
and I think I've brought a lot of value
Hmm.
in that front,
Yeah.
and I think there's some opportunity there. I enjoy it. I actually like really. I mean, I talk about how much I love events. Like I don't like, a lot of people hate travel, and I'm like all about it right now. I mean, like
Hmm.
I want to go to all the events. I want to talk to all the people. I want to get all the ideas. I want to share all the thoughts. I want to do partnerships and collaborations and all that stuff, and having a network of other companies with more resources to
Yeah.
bear is beneficial for what I'm doing and in my business, and maybe in future stuff too. So maybe that's a very generic comment. Winslow says happens more than regarding dealing with staff I've hired. Yeah, staff is, guys,
Hmm.
that is a skill set. Like being a manager. I don't know. You want to talk for just a really? We're going long, but I don't know where you're at
Yeah.
on time. Like
Oh, I'm good. Yeah.
I'm in the zone right now, and I feel like
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit more about it. When we talk about managing people,
Oh, yeah.
you haven't gotten to that yet, really. You're
Not
still
not a
like,
Gloop.
yeah.
Not a Gloop. In my previous startup, I
Andrew, thank you. If I say I'm going out of business, will you guys throw more money at us? Like, that'd be fun. No, we're not going out of business, Andrew. Thank you. We're just sharing some of the challenges of the lean times of the summer. I will say I'm refocusing stuff. I went through some massive contraction. I had to do a layoff. There was only me and 2 other people. One of them I had to lay off over the summer, and then the other one just gave me notice that he's moving on, which I know happens. So
Mhm.
we're just talking about refocusing and stuff like that. Oh, and we ran out of cash, but we're correcting. we're not
Oh
out of
yeah, no
cash
problem.
though, but it's like these are the hard times, and we're just sharing some hard times on my side,
Mhm. Yeah.
in the hopes that maybe I can be a cautionary tale to some of you guys. That's all. But thank you for your contribution. It is much
Yeah.
appreciated, and we don't make any money from this type of thing. This is a passion project, so we
Mhm.
do appreciate the support that you guys send on this.
Yeah. Thank you.
I had Andrew worried. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So we're talking about managing people and all
Yeah.
that stuff. Here's what I want to lead you off with. I
Yeah,
think
sure. Go ahead.
when we talk about career advancement for a lot of people, a lot of you guys might have a 9 to 5. And we look at career advancement, and at some point along your career advancement, thing, you inevitably, most places start looking at managerial roles, right? Where you're just
Mhm.
you're gonna start managing other people and other people. It's
Mhm.
because we're all just pyramid schemes, man. That's what these businesses
That's
are,
it.
right?
That's all
Yeah,
it is.
yeah. Hey, Vishal, good to see you, buddy. And so the problem is like, okay, that seems like what benefits the business as you grow. Like, if you can manage these people and these people can manage their people, and those, because we're just building the pyramid, right? And the
Yep.
CEO doesn't do anything with the
He goes out and
manufacturing
plays
and the
golf
yeah.
and
Right. Right. He's
yeah,
just yeah. So we're all doing
and
our
just collects the check.
multi-level marketing, and hopefully you work your way to the top.
Yeah.
Um and unfortunately, like, you get to the buck does stop with you. So it's like, while you might not be directly tied to like what's happening, and it's not your fault if certain things happen, it is all your fault at some point when you
Mhm.
get all the way to the top. So that is where a lot of your value and strategic vision and stuff like that seems
Mhm.
less tangible and tied to the dollar, the bottom line, come. But
Yeah.
that structure that is inherently built in is kind of messed up, because for people to promote, they have to tap into skills that a lot of people just don't have. Like, being a
Mhm.
manager of people is a very specific skill set, and I would say most people that get thrown into managerial roles, like, either don't have the skills or don't have the skills to learn that, or don't
Yeah.
invest in learning that.
Mhm.
They may be great. They may have been a great engineer and product designer, but then they may be a
Yes.
terrible manager of other engineer and product designers as they promote.
Mhm.
Discuss.
Yeah. So I mean, here at Gloop, we're still really small. We haven't made the jump of hiring people, but we're really close. Like, we should have hired a long time ago, but we just keep reinvesting, and we'll get there. But my previous startup, we at one time, so there was some interesting, some rises and falls, some peaks and valleys, in that. At our peak, we had like 17 people. I was the founding CEO, and I had, some people who were direct reports, and then I had people who, basically, there was like two levels essentially.
Yep.
So you had me with the couple executives that I had, and we were all on the board, and then you would have, the engineers. Now, I mean, it was small enough where I could talk with everyone. I knew back then. I mean, I was 19, 20 years old. I was a terrible manager of people.
I was
um
just gonna
i
ask you that.
I- I had no idea how to manage people. I had no idea how to tell them, what projects that we needed to work on, how we
Sorry, how
needed to
old did you say you
prioritize.
were at the
I was
time?
like 19 or 20. Yeah.
19. Wait a minute, you're saying as a 19-year-old you were a terrible manager of people?
Yeah, who would have thought?
Who'd have thunk it? Interesting. Okay, so what did you learn?
Yeah.
And yeah.
So what I learned is I had to hire someone to do that. And I had an individual who I trusted to manage essentially what we called our junior engineers.
Okay.
And while I got to work with the more professional higher end engineers.
Yep.
And even still, like, managing a team of engineers, like, people would look to me like, hey, what is the next thing that we're working on? Hey, do we really need Do we need to work on this, or we got this problem we have to solve? And in many cases, like I wouldn't know what to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
um and like there were plenty of times where it takes a lot of interpersonal skills to be able to communicate to people, like, hey, like, you're not doing a great job at this, you need to do better, but without blowing up at them and yelling at them, or y- you know um
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, causing workplace issues. It's something that I think that I've learned from. Again, I haven't really put those new skills to the test.
Okay.
As we continue to, so that was after our significant investment, where I think we had $1 million round at that point.
Okay.
So we had some decent money, some reserves, and then we went through a slight contraction because we realized that we were going to go in a different direction.
Yeah.
um and then we started kind of expanding again, got some new people in, but yeah, it's you know I know that it's going to be a new chapter for us in Gloop coming up. And I mean, it's part where I'm actually scared, which is one of the reasons why I went out and I got a business coach.
Yeah.
Started having someone kind of work with me a little bit more on the ins and outs of, as we are changing, because I see exactly what's happening, and I'm terrified of what I don't know. Like, I know that I've been through some of this before, but I'm like, I don't know this, and I need to surround myself with the individuals that know it better.
Well, and that's
So
the
that.
key. That's the key right
Hmm.
there. So the fact that you have that awareness and you have the
Hmm.
ability to do that, okay? Because
Hmm.
I got to tell you, I've always struggled to find good mentorship and coaching. And
Hmm.
maybe, I could have invested more in that. Or maybe I'm just looking at it different because, like, I talk to a lot of people about this stuff. Maybe I just get that in a different way. Like, I've never had anybody that's specifically like, will you be my mentor? The way that I think a
Yeah.
lot of people have. But what you honed in on, that humility, that
Hmm.
knowledge to know, like, when there are always going to be blind spots. There's
Yep.
always going to be the things you don't know. You don't know how to proceed, and sometimes, like, you just have to decide on something. So sometimes being a leader is just making the decision, right?
Hmm.
Because sometimes the indifference is detrimental as well, in terms of, like, your visibility and leadership. If you're wishy-washy, I think a lot of times you might be better committing to a suboptimal course of action
Yeah. Hmm.
versus no action at all, right?
Hmm.
Missing opportunities and things like that. But man, I
Yep.
mean, the paths are fraught with
Hmm.
danger in all different ways and stuff like that. And that's where sometimes I don't like using the word luck. But
Hmm.
sometimes some luck. There's some things that are more fortuitous than others and whatnot. But there are elements of luck, I guess, to some extent.
Hmm.
Uh, but you do need to be prepared for that. Like, nothing is ever always going to go right, and how do you handle that? And honestly, like, how you handle the downtimes does prove, like, what it
Hmm.
is. And sometimes, as hard as it is to do the layoffs like I did and stuff like that, it's just like you'll get respected more for, like,
Hmm.
got to survive. Flying us all into the ground does nobody
Hmm.
any good, right?
Yep. Hmm.
um I feel bad because I feel responsible for other people, but frankly I was taking on a ton of stress and gray hair and sleepless nights because I had too many dependents, both
Hmm.
on my tax form and just in business. And
Hmm.
I couldn't. I wanted to be able to provide for everybody, but, like, again, I do nobody any good if I'm just a complete stress ball that's hiding at home, doesn't want to show up at work and all that stuff too. So yeah,
Hmm.
it's an interesting challenge, but thank you for sharing that experience and having that humility. And it's going to be interesting going in, as you start to grow and realize, like,
Hmm.
you're going to have to hire again. Are you going to be able to, like, what would your strategy be, if I can ask you, going
Sure.
in for growth? Like, are you going to hire, like, a GM? Because at some point when you still have limited resources, you're still small, you're bootstrapped.
Hmm.
So it's not like you can just hire 10 people to grow.
Nope.
right?
Mm-hmm.
You're
Yeah.
counting on some of these POs coming in. Maybe you take them to the bank, get a line of credit, or
Mm-hmm.
maybe you seek some investment so that you can expand more rapidly because it's
Yeah.
always trading time for
There's
dollars.
always a trade-off. Yeah. I mean, I think my strategy right now is finding something that is easy enough that I can. Well, so let me back up. Um, One of the big things about getting someone on board is making for sure that there are clearly defined processes outlined so that someone who doesn't understand the business and how it operates can perform a job or the duties requested. So basically clearly defining the rails or painting the lines on the road and telling them these are the rules of the road. um, in a very limited capacity. We're probably going to start off really small, in something where we're going to take in some employees to help us with fulfillment, pick and pack, those sorts of things.
Yep.
That are easy to kind of get our feet wet with. And as we continue to grow, hopefully the opportunities that affords us of working on the business instead of in the business, we are going to hone some of those managerial skills where we can become a little bit better at saying, hey, these are the directions, these are the things that we need to go and we need to do, and eventually kind of work into getting more individuals in to help out that are more multifaceted. These are going to be key people that we're going to hopefully have as we continue growing and moving forward, that can kind of morph and do other various jobs depending on what's required. So
Got it.
I certainly don't have all of the answers, and there are a bunch of different ways that this could go. So
I think it sounds like a sound plan, dude. And it's
mhm.
it's always interesting to say. I'll be interested to talk,
Yeah.
in practice how it goes versus the theory here.
Hmm.
Sometimes it's the luck of like getting some just key talent at the right time, finding
Hmm.
people, and the danger is when you're going through a rapid growth mode, especially is
Hmm.
you're just trying to throw people at the problem, and my
Yeah.
God, is that not a good choice a lot of the
And
time.
that's one of those things where we haven't done, like, I mean, we've been growing at a pretty substantial clip, and there are many things where we probably need to throw people at the problem, but we're not right now. And I think it's really intentional, simply because that's that it's like any entrepreneur. Like I've gone through the arts grants program. They have this idea and they're like, we just need money in order to execute it.
Right.
And the answer is always no, you don't just need money. There are times in which money helps. But in many cases, you need to be willing to put in the hard work and the effort to actually get this thing going on what it is that you're doing. Like, you have to pass the filter test, you know?
Gotta pass the sniff
And
test.
I think that's what this is like we have to intentionally pass this test and basically grow in an incremental step so that we can then start putting fuel onto the fire and accelerating that.
Yeah.
Because if we just start throwing people at the problem, I'm going to be in the same boat that I was in back in my early days, because that's exactly what I did. And
Yeah.
I didn't know how to manage people, and then I hired someone, and then things got disconnected, projects never got completed, and I was a terrible manager at that point, because I was naive, I was young, I didn't know any better, and then eventually the board threw me out
It's
you
a
know
perfect storm of problems. So it's one, you're young
hmm
and inexperienced, so that's always a
yeah.
challenge. So the fact that you were actually able to get venture funding at that age and people to back your play is very
That
impressive.
was the right time and place. Everyone
Very
was all
impressive.
hyped up on the Mark Zuckerberg,
Oh yeah, the
oh,
Wunderkind story. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
exactly. Hmm.
So you got that, and now it's one with venture stuff. It's stupid easy to spend other people's money, right?
Hmm.
So like this is
Yep.
part of the reason like I don't. Well, it's not to say that there's not play, but like venture funding and what's important and like a lot of the stuff, like they talk about being pre-revenue, like it's all about just building attention and like who cares about the money right now, right? Like, oh, it's easy. Of
Hmm.
course it's easy for you to spend money. It's not your money. Um, But then when you combine that with the fact that one of the most expensive parts of operating the business, the payroll, the people,
Hmm.
and you're trying to navigate like, okay, we gotta move quick, right? We gotta, we're gonna move fast and break stuff. I gotta hire a bunch of people. And that is like the last thing that you want to do um,
Hmm.
uh, mindlessly,
Yep.
because having a bad fit and the
Hmm.
toxicity that can create in the workspace,
Hmm.
and or even if it's just like there's some people that have like an incredible skills, but they're put in the wrong space. They're just not
Yep.
given the right role, right? And so
Yeah.
if you
They're
don't
not
have that
enabled.
ability to
Hmm.
move the pieces around on the board and do
Hmm.
that, and that's an art. And like a lot of times those things don't become apparent until you're in
Oh
process.
yeah. Hmm.
So either you have to have the resources to weather that and realize, like, okay, this is going to take us like,
Hmm.
6 months to get everybody in the right seat. Okay.
Yep.
Or, and there's going to be people that say, nope, that was wrong. You
Yep.
have to be a little bit more, um, cutthroat, I think, about like,
Hmm.
nope, this isn't working out. Boom, cut bait. Like, and
Yep.
that maybe that's easier when it's not your money. I don't know, maybe it's not, maybe it's
Yeah.
it's like, well, who cares, because like it's just coming out of the, but your burn rate and the things like we talk about where it's
I mean,
it,
yeah.
that's not
I'll
a
say that
thing when you're a
I'll,
bootstrap.
I'll say that it was easy to spend other people's money, and it got easier to be to the point where even if it wasn't a great fit, it didn't matter to me
Yeah,
because it's like, well, I still see a value here or whatever, and that's where I was wrong. And I needed to be a better entrepreneur because I needed to realize that this person wasn't fit for that position, and I needed to move on or past it, or I needed to get something else in.
yeah.
And yeah, that's the issue. I think in terms of it takes someone who knew more about being an entrepreneur than I did at that moment to run that effectively. I mean,
Yeah,
I feel that there are a lot of things I would have done differently, and
yeah,
maybe in 5 years' time. I'm going to look back to these days and be like, wow, look at all of the things I did terribly wrong.
yeah.
But that's the process of growing. I mean, I think that one of the things that's really been helping me a lot as an entrepreneur is looking at things in a craftsman mindset. So basically becoming mastering these skills
Mm,
in
mastery.
specifically.
Yeah, okay.
uh if we look at craftsmen, they take pride in their work, and it's always what they could do better the next time. Every single thing, like whether it's a master cabinet maker or tabletops, whatever it might be. If you talk with them, like they'll take pride in their work, but they'll actually like point out the issues of where they've actually had, like, oh, I could have done this better, I could have done this better. And it's part of this process that they go through of mastery. And
Mm.
once you start mastering these things, it actually becomes a passion. And that's what really kind of accelerates this growth, I feel like. And for me, I want to be a better entrepreneur. I want to be the best at, what I'm doing now. And part of that really comes down to looking at all of the things and understanding, like, yes, I have passion at doing Gloop, but I think the passion is more so just me learning and doing that hard work of making myself better at
Oh,
this.
no, that's
Um,
interesting. So you're
you know,
saying that the value, a lot of the value you're getting out of this is the proving that you can
mhm.
build. This is your greatest make, not that it's like making money scaling Gloop or whatever, but like that you can can
Mhm. I
can
mean,
master entrepreneurship.
yeah, essentially. I mean, it's just
Hmm.
what can I do in this moment to make myself a better entrepreneur? What can I do in, the next moment to build upon those skills and
Yep.
continue to become better at this?
Yep.
Like I want to be the best that I can possibly be in every facet of this entrepreneurship piece. And in order to do that, I've got to go through the grind. I've got to go through the hard work. I've got to put in this effort and thinking like I call it this craftsman mindset because it's borrowing on the aspect of like what a craftsman does. They're constantly in their shop, they're constantly working, they're trying to become better at doing the next thing, whatever it is. So I don't know, it's an interesting perspective. It's given me some excitement, I guess.
I see what you're saying, and like, yes, I think there's an element to that as well. I don't think I've ever thought of it as like honing craftsmanship in the same way, but I also don't operate with that mindset because I'm a broad
Hmm.
strokes
Hmm.
individual. Like I get bored with mastery. I that's why I'm more of a generalist, right? And so it's like
Hmm.
I want to hone my craft to a specific level, and then I want to do other stuff.
Well, and there's some interesting things. Like this is one of those conversations I've been having a lot with this mentor, was specifically like many people will reach an acceptable level of performance
Hmm.
and leave it at that because they find this generalist. But what you find is with these individuals is they can never they typically fall into this trap of chasing a passion project
Hmm.
or chasing something that they're passionate about because they never can actually scratch that itch fully. And if you look at athletes, in many cases, the athletes that succeed and become the best athletes in the world are the ones that have these regimens that aren't really basically training them to be a better athlete. It's training all of the other aspects of their own personality to push through, to persevere in these challenges.
All right.
Basically, constantly, it's like working out. You're constantly going to the gym. You're constantly working out, and in many cases, my wife's father is a bodybuilder, and like I never actually understood, like all the times like I've had conversations, I always thought it was like ridiculous to the level of commitment he had,
Hmm.
for
Hmm.
this bodybuilding. And it wasn't until I actually kind of realized that it wasn't that he was doing it to be a better bodybuilder per se. He was actually trying to go through this process to just it was a passion of his that evolved out of bettering himself. Can he do better? Can
Hmm.
he make and master this thing? And that was the drive.
You know,
And so
I
go
have a
ahead.
thought just really quick on this, and then we speaking of mastery, we should give a master class on how to turn a 1 hour podcast into a 2 hour podcast because
I know,
that is what
right?
we do when we get going. But on the subject of bodybuilding and personal fitness,
Mhm,
I did a short on this, like, I don't know, maybe a month or two ago, where I was musing around the thoughts of like why that really resonates with some people. And I think what it is specifically to bodybuilding or to just high level
mhm,
fitness is that you have a visible physical manifestation of your efforts in a way that
mhm,
you just don't get with a lot of other things, right? Because so much like that value can be more amorphous on other
sure.
aspects. Like, yeah, we have metrics in terms of like, oh, you know, if I do this well, like I'll have this many dollars in my bank account, you know, financial metrics or
Mhm,
whatever else.
sure.
But it's like a way of a pride where it's like if I put in this work,
Mhm,
I can show how much work that I've been putting in and how committed I am to something where other people can visibly see that
mhm,
on me.
sure.
And I have the add-on benefits of being held to an extent, right? Because there's diminishing
Yeah.
returns. Like some of the best bodybuilders are probably like overly excessive,
Mhm,
right? Like
mhm.
but again, balance in all things. That's my
Yeah.
theory and I'm like, well,
Mhm,
but I would say like I don't know if I want to achieve that level of mastery because at some point that just gets like
mhm.
obsessive.
Well, and so I think again there are pieces where people can get distracted on what it is that they're mastering. Again, this is all some of these things that I'm learning myself and I'm discovering. So I'm not an expert in this, but what I think what it comes down to, I believe, is understanding that it's not the specific thing that you're trying to master. Like, in a craftsman, like I want to master building the most elegant table or being the best cabinet maker, whatever that might be. It's more so I want to understand how to wield the tools that I have at my disposal that better than anyone else,
Hmm.
and become so good that I can take up this next piece, whatever it might be, and I can then master that because I have the skill sets, or I have the ability like the willpower, if you will, to go through and do that.
Yeah.
Again, I
Yeah.
don't know if it makes sense. There's a
Yeah.
lot of
No.
things I'm still learning
I
here.
think it does.
You know, um,
Um. George White had an interesting comment that that
mhm,
strikes me in a way. He goes, "Would a pessimist be good at starting?" I think he's trying to say good at starting a business. I would reframe that question slightly and say like, do you require optimism to be a successful entrepreneur? Like take it in the negative of that. I don't know if I'll offer my thought. You offer yours. I don't know if it's required, but I think it's better if you do. To put it just completely generically,
So
because if you're
so
just
you were
too
you
doom
were
and
saying about
gloom,
optimism.
you're not going to do it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think it's interesting, right? Because there was a point in my at starting this, I was super optimistic. I was wildly optimistic.
Yeah,
And I think in many cases, having that unfoundering, like optimism, like is what drives entrepreneurs forward. It's that piece that it's like, I am going to continue moving. Like I believe in this so much. Um, Whereas if you're too pessimistic, I think it would be difficult to get started. Now that being said, there's many places where I think I've changed some of my viewpoints, and I've become quite pessimistic on aspects. And I don't know if it's necessarily to an advantage or disadvantage. Um, I think that there's a balance. I think if you're too pessimistic, you're not going to be able to get started. But if you're too optimistic after you've gotten started, you can actually run into issues, and so you need to
sure.
like dial that back a little bit.
Krusty's point is probably well taken in that I think it has more to do with realism maybe than
Hmm.
optimism and pessimism. Like you got to have a reasonable dose of like what the realities of the challenges are. Like it's not always going to be easy.
Yeah.
It's a constant. You're
Hmm.
swinging back and forth. Like I think it's good to be skeptical about stuff sometimes. Like
Sure.
just don't. Unbridled optimism is not great, and unbridled pessimism is not great, right? But
Yeah.
realism, that it's requires a balance and all that stuff is where you want to be, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Good question though. I think we got to find somewhere to wrap it up because I can't even like if we covered so much ground. I think
Yep. We
we
did.
probably both had some repressed energy in terms of just things we wanted to talk about and share. And I'm glad to see so many people jumping in and some not so familiar. At one point, I saw Wex jump in and say hi, which was cool to
Yeah.
see. So we got some latecomers and all that stuff. And Vishal, I didn't even get to. He said the chat was really resonating with him because he's going through some manpower, some personnel issues, and that's I mean that
Hmm.
again can be an episode to itself.
Oh yes.
Managing of people is just people are always the X factor in this, and if you want to grow, there's only so far you can go by yourself.
Hmm.
So we'll have to do more of that later. I would love to have Vishal get on and share some of the challenges and maybe talk through what they learned
Yes.
and what he's learning for it at some point. I think that would be good. But I would say let's try to wrap it here. Good episode, lots of
Yeah.
stuff. I want to thank you guys for just like letting us vent and let me share my journey, and for all the people that are supporting us, whether it's financially or just being here asking questions and contributing and
Hmm.
saying hi and all that stuff. We love you all.
Hmm.
um this is even though it's still in the realm of a passion project, I do believe this is a very important topic of conversation. I think it's near and dear. I would love to see more and more people take the leap when appropriate with realistic expectations, and
Hmm.
uh and we'll keep them coming. I've got a queue of some people that I'm reaching out to for some awesome future guest spots, which is good.
Cool.
And we'll continue to refine the offering, but as always, please engage with us. Our Twitter handles and our social media handles are down below if you want to hear us talk about stuff, if you like what you hear, if you don't like what you hear, all that stuff. Excuse me, too much talking. um until then, I want to wish everybody a happy weekend. Spend some time, get out, talk to people, engage, find your mentorship and your coaching where you can. I think that's a good takeaway. And get that FaceTime in. That's another good takeaway from today. And we look
Yep.
forward to seeing any of you guys at upcoming events, Earth being the next one out on the East Coast. And we will catch you on the next make her that money. Here next Friday, I'm getting your commitment right now, Andrew. Next Friday,
Let's do it.
9 a.m. on the YouTubes, after the fact on all the major podcasting platforms. And we will talk to you soon. Happy weekend,
See
everyone.
ya.
Bye bye.